Hello. Um, what was I doing? Oh yeah, today I wanted to review Animorphs. I don't know why I'm whispering now. Animorphs, the first graphic novel came out last year. I actually have the second one too, and that's all there is. Based on the young adult series from the '90s, which I was super obsessed with when it first came out, and then I kind of just forgot about it completely until not too long ago, and then well, then this came out, and I was like, oh yeah, Animorphs. At the time, my two favorite things was that X-Men TV show, the cartoon, I mean, and the X-Files. And this was like something that just combined the two things. But now Animorphs is back, and it says on here based on the novel by K.A. Applegate and Michael Grant, which is her husband's name because even though it's K.A. Applegate on each book, it was those two writing the books up to like I think a number 30 or something like that, and then it was a bunch of ghostwriters pretty much after that. I think they still wrote like the Megamorphs and stuff like that, but I don't think they wrote any in the main series after that. I'm not sure about that though. And this is adapted by Chris Grine, who's a writer and artist, and usually does his own stuff. But I guess funny story. I think it's a little funny anyway. I guess he was gonna say, oh, a funny story. I guess Chris Grine. Did I say Chris Grant a second ago? I might have said that. Chris Grine is his name. Um, he got a call from like some agent or someone, and being like, "What do you think about adapting novels?" And he like thought about it, just like I don't adapt. I write my own stuff. I write and edit or illustrate my own stuff. I don't adapt. I don't write other people's stuff. And then they're like, um, well, what if it was the Animorph series? And he said then he spit coffee all over his keyboard. uh, so and yeah, now he's doing it, and I think he's doing a really good job. My only complaint about this one, about the artwork anyway, is that I feel like in some scenes, not all of them, some scenes, I don't know if you can even show it, but like on this page, everyone's noses is way too red. Hold on. You see how red that nose is? Holy shit, that's a red nose. And it's not every page. Some like I'll find another one. Like even the last page before it, actually. Like that's not so bad. Over here, what's up? Why is that red nose so red? Yeah, is everyone drunk? Maybe that's it. All the Animorphs are drunk. That makes a lot of sense, actually, with some of the decisions they make in these. Okay. What complaints do I have, really, or anything? I think this is a perfect adaptation, perfectly adapted. Like he doesn't really add Chris Grine doesn't really add too much from what I remember of the book, or if he does, he might just I think he just like changes things here and there just to make it so it fits this type of adaptation. So also, the books were always first person perspective and would always like shift between books who was taught or which perspective we'd be seeing that book from. Like this one was Jake, who's the leader of the Animorphs. The next one, this one's Rachel, and she's on the cover. This one has everyone on the cover, but he writes it in a way that so it's not first person perspective essentially, and it also it doesn't have really any narration like you might expect from something adapted like that. It doesn't do the voiceover narration boxes at all. And I was pretty impressed with that. Every once in a while there'll be a thought bubble just to like add a little thing here, but it's never like it never like switches suddenly into like a book, like you read a book, or anything. Like some adaptations do. Like oh, I actually have this one. Which I meant to give to my nephew, but I forgot to send it out. The 1984 one, which is very much like reading a book. There's lots of narration, but that's a different style of book. These were always like kind of much more action packed and much more kind of horrifying actually. I know that's something he does really well. I think maybe a little better in this one from what I'm reading so far. I don't know. The Visitor is number two. Um, but he makes the horrifying aspects I think really good, and like some of it like here there was definitely a lot of just gross stuff happening, especially in the beginning, because then uh it's such a great way to introduce it too, because it's just oh, maybe I should explain the plot in case people don't know what Animorphs is. It's maybe a little more obscure nowadays. Um, in the '90s, they were really big, and I remember there was a TV show, but we never had cable when I was growing up. Until like I was maybe in my 20s. That's when my mom got cable. But so I could never watch the show because I think it was on Nickelodeon or one of those. And I always wanted to, but from what I've heard, it's not nearly as good. I mean, how could it be? It's like, but I haven't seen it, so I won't even comment on it. Oh, the plot of this, I'll just explain basically the plot of this one. It starts with, um, it's basically kind of just like kids randomly going home from the mall, and it's Jake and his friend Marco, uh, his best friend Marco. We're just like in an arcade at the mall. So I mean, arcades, are there arcades anymore? I guess there's there's like bar arcades now, because only adults play video games and only if they're drunk. I know that's not true. Arcades are a lot rarer now. Malls are a lot rarer too, for that matter. Yeah, this is definitely like very 90s. I kind of like that as well. That he didn't like try to update it, right? Chris Grine, I mean, he didn't with this adaptation. He didn't try to make it like, oh, now it's the 2020s. Who cares? It's like it's definitely still stuck in the 90s, which I think is a real smart move to like keep it there. So now it's kind of like a period piece now, even though at the time it was current. And I think that's cool. But anyway, it's like these. I think they're all like 10 or 11 at the beginning, maybe a bit older than that. I forget if they even mention like I'm 14 or something. Oh, I think they're freshmen in high school because he does say that he like tries out for the basketball team because he wants to get closer to his brother. But he was like, oh no, he says like it's his old team, so it must be junior high. Okay, so whatever, I don't know. I'm gonna say they're maybe 12 at the beginning because it goes on, they age up and stuff, but and they're just like the kid they're like the exact right kids they need to be, I think, um, to have been thrown into such a situation and stuff, but like it's just really strange. No, that's not the right word. It's really horrifying. There we go. It's really like just scary, I think, just right away. And I think that's like the X-Files aspect to it because like they're walking out of the mall. They meet up with Rachel and Cassie, and they're like best friends, and Rachel is Jake's cousin, so they like know each other already. Um, kind of through that, and they're just like, we're walking home through the construction site, kind of spooky. Maybe you girls should come along. And then Rachel gets pissed because Rachel's like a badass at heart. When I was growing up, my favorite characters were definitely Jake and Tobias. Jake because he's like the leader and also really strong in that way, and like Tobias, I just related I think a lot with Tobias at the time. I also lived in a horrible living situation where I probably would have preferred to turn into a hawk and fly away. But now reading it now like this and that one, just these comics, I might start reading the books. Would anyone want that? Me to like review each Animorphs book one at a time? I would. I don't know. It's like I said, this is easy enough, easier than the other stuff I'm doing right now. But I think my favorite characters now are probably Rachel. I mean, Rachel's maybe my number one, just from like these two books. Maybe I might need to start reading the books again, or just wait till I think this October is when number 3 is coming out, and then they're going to come out once every 4 months or something like that. So it'll be faster after that. So I'm a little excited about that. Because these are really good. This one especially. Well, the number 2 is also good, but I'll talk about that in the next video. Oh, I keep getting distracted trying to explain the plot. So they're walking down. Okay, and Tobias, yeah, and then they meet Tobias, who's kind of the weird outcast kid, who was obviously me in high school. Like I said, I related to him the most. Oh, my other favorite character I think might be Marco. I'm not sure yet. Maybe once I start reading the books, if I do that. Hate it when I run out of coffee. And then an alien spaceship lands right in front of him and gets out this andalite, which is one of the made up. There's a bunch of made up aliens throughout the series, but that's the first one they meet is an andalite, and they're like lucky to meet them first because he's like, hey, you're being attacked and you're being your whole planet's being body snatched by these things called the Yeerks, and I'm about to die, but I can give you the power to morph. So here you go. So anytime any animal they have to concentrate on it. They can't just like touch an animal and it's like, nope, now I can become a whatever. They have to like touch it and like concentrate, and then they can morph into that animal. Any animal, and that's part of it that I think is pretty cool. Is if it's doesn't matter the size or shape or whatever, they can morph like Rachel gets an elephant morph in this one. At one point, like the thing, you can kind of see it up here, but like Jake morphs into a lizard. You can kind of see it. Yeah, I'll try. There, you can see the lizard. I just mean like, so any animal. And I think that's really cool, just because they do things that are clever with it. They do a lot of clever. I mean, that's the name of the books. If they weren't clever about it, people wouldn't read them. But they make it like it's really like a superpower. I mean, it is, but it's not just like. And that's the other thing, because they can only stay in morph for 2 hours, and after that they are just stuck in that morph. So it's dangerous too, as well. Then Visor 3, who's like the leader of the invasion of Earth, who's the only Yeerk who's taken an Andalite body, so he's the only Yeerk who also has the ability to morph. And he has all these crazy monsters from different planets, and the first one he morphs into, he uses to kill the Andalite that saved them. He has a name, I can't remember it right now. It's like Elfhanger or something like that. I think it's got Elf in the. I just remember it starts with Elf. Elfhanger or Elfforger. Elffucker. It's something like that. But he that's the other thing. He really likes to morph into things and then eat people and stuff when they piss him off. He's like the worst leader too. That's the other thing that I think is kind of funny. I mean, he's like the stereotypical bad guy you'd see in a comic book, and then or like a James Bond villain type who just like, oh, you pissed me off, dead, immediately. Like, that's not leaders like that don't work, because people will just rebel and stuff in real life. But in like fiction like this, or I think it works, and I think he's one of those villains who's like so full of himself he doesn't quite realize that he's really just a big joke. So I kind of like that. He kind of amuses me personally. I don't know if he would do that for everyone. He's kind of like the villain from The Losers, which never mind. That's part of my DC ranking videos I kind of stopped doing, but I'll start doing them again. Somebody actually wrote to me and hey, you gonna do these or no? Really disappointed, and then they cried a little. It was weird. But I do plan on doing those again. How do I mention that now? Who cares? Who cares about my life? Let's talk about Animorphs. So fucking cool. Oh, I wanted to find that picture just because like a full page of him turning into this thing to eat Elfhanger or Elffucker or whatever his name is. Just because he loves to. Oh, I wanted to. Here's the picture of there's the Andalites. You kind of see them. They're kind of like deers with scorpion tails, or like centaurs with scorpion tails, but they don't mouths because they speak entirely through psychic speech. And I think it explains in one of the books. Actually, I don't remember. I'm not going to talk about it because I don't remember. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, he just likes to turn into crazy monsters that eat people when they piss him off. So here it's Elfhanger's the bad or the good guy, and he's the bad guy or whatever. He's on the opposite side of the war, basically. It's really a war story. That's the other thing that I thought was fascinating, and K.A. Applegate talked about in interviews later. So I just showered. Now my beard's really itchy. Keep scratching it. But it's meant to be like a war story for kids, about kids in a war, because it's like kind of the ways the wars go too, and I kind of see it like them starting out being like really gung ho about it, except for Marco. He's the only one who's like, we should not be doing this, guys. But everyone else is just like, no, we gotta save the world. Woo, save the world, X-Men. That, and it's like it's all like super fucking sweet, man. Oh my god, these kids, they're all gonna be traumatized for life, but at least I'm entertained. And but it's also like I feel because the kids are so young, because they're like 12 years old or maybe 11 to 13 is what I would say at the beginning of this. I mean, I feel like that's the age when you're like just starting to kind of come into your own adult wise kind of, but because of that, you kind of make really bad decisions and don't really think about like, like, wow, I just almost got in an accident and died. It was more like, wow, that was fucking awesome. Should we do it again? I don't know. Maybe. All right, let's do it, or whatever. Um, like you're maybe a little more reckless at that age, and I think that's kind of the perfect age for these people to be like kind of gung ho. We're the X-Men type of thing. We're the Animorphs. We're gonna save the world type of thing. And maybe like as it slowly continues, from what I remember way back in the day, it's like it becomes more and more like real to them. I think. Just like people in a war, like when you first do it, they do some of those like join the army, it's amazing, woo! When you join, then you're like, yeah, gonna kill Hitler and all that or whatever, and then but then you get there and it's like this is not how they advertised it. This is fucking bloody and awful, and all my friends are dead. you know, all my friends are dying every day and shit. But what another thing that I think is really cool about this is that it's like the whole thing is basically Invasion of the Body Snatchers, um, for the whole series, because like the Yeerks are these people who, anyone could be a Yeerk, and the only way they'd be able to figure it out is because like the Yeerks need to be fed every 3 days. And in this giant Yeerk pool that's underneath the city, they like discover that. Spoilers, I guess, but I don't know. I spoil things. I spoil everything. Just assume that from now on. But they find out that the Yeerk pool is like covers it's all over the city that they live in. They never like mention what city they're in. There's like this motif at the beginning, like we'll never tell you where we are, who we really are, where we live, and all that stuff to make it sound like it's real. Just make kids like me like really paranoid back in the day. Like, what if this is real? And they're selling these books all over the country. And wait, but I was kind of like that. I thought that was a cool motif. I still like Jake a lot, is what I would say, just because this is his story and we're with him the whole time, just like in the book. But even though it's like more of a third person, it's definitely like third person limited, not third person omniscient. But that's how the books were written, they were first person, so even more limited. Even though I think Rachel's cooler now, just because I don't know, she's much more gung ho and stuff, and like I think at the time when I was reading her books, it didn't help that the second book, I'll talk about that tomorrow, but like the second book itself, like the graphic novel, I think is better than the second book was from what I remember. It just in that it was probably my least favorite of the first like 10 or 20 books, like out of a vast majority of them, at least before they got to those to the ghost ridden ones, which then things got pretty hit or miss. I think I stopped reading then. I never finished the series. I'm sure everyone dies because these kids are way over their head from the get-go. That's my guess, but don't spoil it, even though I'm spoiling everything for you. I don't care, spoil whatever. Everyone dies or nobody dies, or I don't know, I keep flipping through this. Just be like, oh man, that was cool. Yeah. Oh, maybe I'll tell you about the characters really quick. Just I forgot what I was talking about just now. This is Jake's book, and he's the leader, and I like him because he's got he does have kind of a leadership sense, and it's something that I think from what I remember, he gets better about it as the books go on. In this one, he's just kind of figuring it out. Like in this one, it was like a group decision. By the next book already, you kind of see him already like taking decisions and being like, I am the leader. I'm the one who's deciding these things, even though people still aren't listening to him quite yet. But I'll get into that. I'll keep saying I'll get into that later tomorrow with the next video. Oops. But I do like Jake a lot. I think he's actually, they make him realistic enough, I think, to make him seem like a 12-year-old kid who's trying to lead a bunch of 12-year-old kids into battle and shit. And he also has a lot on his shoulders because his motivation is one of the more interesting, because his brother is a controller, and he finds that out pretty much right away, or during the course of this book, he finds that out. And so he's basically the one who's the most in it at this point. He's like immediately has motivation to try to stop this Yeerk invasion, and keep fighting, unlike the other people who don't. Except for Tobias, who pretty much doesn't have anything to live for. He kind of gives me that impression. He's just like probably has an abusive home and would probably be out fighting in a war than having to go home again. Marco just wants to get out of it right away. He's pretty much just like right away. He's the only one who's like, we're in way over our heads and we should stop this and we're crazy for even trying this. But he still helps. He still like wants to help Jake to get his brother Tom. I think his brother's name is Tom. He wants to help Jake to save his brother. And then Rachel is Jake's cousin, and she's like the barbarian. She's like the muscle of the group, which I think is kind of interesting. Especially in the 90s, you didn't really see like girls being the muscle in like any group, Sometimes they'd be really powerful, like Storm on X-Men. Incredibly powerful, but I wouldn't call her the muscle by any means. It would definitely be like Wolverine or Beast. But Rachel, I really like her for that aspect. Just because she's the one who's the most gung-ho, the warrior of the group. If this were like a D&D campaign, Jake would be like the rogue, smart and talented, but maybe not the one up front of battle. I guess everyone would be pretty much rogues except her. She'd be the warrior. Just because there's no wizards really. Maybe Axe, but he comes later. Then there's Cassie. She's like really good with animals, and I've heard people call her Mary Sue, but I don't really see that. At least not in these comics. Maybe once I get to the book 3 and just reading the book. Like I guess she's talented at morphine. She's like has like kind of a knack for it right away. And I think maybe that's just because she's really good with animals. Her parents run a vet for wild animals. They call it something, and just the animal clinic or something. But because of that, she has access to a bunch of wild animals that they can morph into at any time, pretty much. So she's really useful in that way, but I wouldn't call her Mary Sue just because she's just, I don't know. I mean, for this book and the next book, I mean, I think her first book is book 4, I think. Yeah, because book 3 was Tobias, and I think book 5 is Marco. I don't know. If I start reading the books, I'll know then. But I didn't really see her that way, at least not for these outside. I mean, she like has a knack for morphine, but she also like has a knack with animals. So I don't know. I think that makes sense to me. Is there anything I didn't like? That's what I'm thinking right now. Compared to actually, I think everything about from what I remember the novel, which it's been a while since I've read it, it's like a perfect adaptation because it doesn't take anything out of it from what I remember, and like the stuff it like maybe makes these minor changes here and there, but I feel like each and every one of those changes is an improvement. Because I do remember there were a couple of parts in the book itself that kind of bugged me, I guess, just that like they were like slowed down or take too long to do one thing or the other, and here like everything's got an even pace, and also, I mean, it was the first book in the new series and stuff, so there's bound to be a couple things like that. I would say the one, I mean, like this is a fairly long one. It's longer than the other ones, and like from what I've read, it was the longest of all the books, except for the Megamorphs and stuff. But because of the scene at the beginning where everything has to be introduced and everything, it kind of feels like that was kind of a first act, and then it's another first act after that, because it's like, oh well, you all get your powers and stuff, you're good to go, go be Animorphs, sort of. I mean, through some really horrifying stuff where they have to run from aliens and watch someone get eaten alive by that giant monster I showed you earlier. But then it's like they wake up the next day, and then we have to go through another first act as they kind of learn about the powers they have, and um, and then have to set up whatever the conflict is in this one, basically. But it's still, I would still recommend it. Pretty good. It's pretty good. It's really good. And if you haven't read Animorphs before and you wanted to like start with this and it's just like this is just the first book anyway. You could read this and not read the first book and then start with the next book or the next graphic novel, because there's 2 out now, and I think there's like 64 books, I want to say, or something like that. I think that's maybe that's only if you include all the Megamorphs and the Andalite Chronicles and stuff like that. I know there was a few side stories, because they were making bank. And I like the Megamorphs, what I remember, because I always felt that those would be like, if the book series was like a TV show, those would be like the movies they would have made. And they always felt like that, like being a lot bigger and more action oriented, more plot than what would be in the normal series. But you also didn't have to read them, from what I remember, at least for the first one. I remember like reading that and being like, this feels like a step backwards for some reason, but I still really like it. But it also, like, once it's over, it's like they never mention it again, or like they do it only in passing, as if it were a movie. They might mention it again, but it's like, well, it's not actually canon, but we'll like say something to make it seem like it is, type of thing. So I guess that's that's the same problem with the book, just that like it's a bit long, or it feels long, even though like they're young adults and stuff, it feels longer just because like you go through a first act and then you go through another first act, and then it gets pretty good. Some action packed, horrifying stuff, lots of monsters in this one. It's not as horrifying as some later ones, from what I remember. More like the monster type of stuff than the like actual horror stuff. Where you're like really scared for the characters. I mean, you still are, especially once they go down into the Yerk pool in this one. It's just like, holy fuck balls. This is gonna be some traumatizing crap later. So I would highly recommend it. Especially if you were a fan of the Animorphs back in the day. And even if you're not, actually, because I think it's really well written. It's a great adaptation. And you don't have to read the original book or anything to compare it or whatever, because this is a better start than reading the book is, actually, I think, just because it's the right kind of adaptation. I feel there's 2 adaptations: the ones where they adapt the work, and the other one where they really want to make their own story but are too scared to just write their own story. And this is definitely the one where like Chris Grine really knows what he's doing. He really obviously appreciates the work, at least if he's not actually a fan from back in the day. It's really good. It's like you can tell it's made with passion and intelligence and talent. And again, if you want to just start the series with this graphic novel instead of the books, you can totally do that because it's just the book anyway. I mean, I would say you don't have to like read both. Read one or the other. If you prefer comics to the written word, totally, pick this up. If you prefer the books, I mean, if you prefer the books, then, get the books. I don't know if I should rate things with numbers anymore. I mean, just because I don't care. I'd give this a 10 out of 10 if I was still rating things with numbers. 10 out of 10, just because it's a perfect adaptation. Like, the problems I have with it, like, it's like the double first act stuff was a problem in the book, and that's not really the graphic novel's fault. And if he fixed that, I probably would have been pissed off, right? Because it's like, well, that's not what happened in the books. This isn't an adaptation anymore. You're an idiot, like, so yeah, I would say this is it's a great read, and I would highly recommend it. Again, I was an Animorphs fan back in the day, so I don't know if it would be quite the same experience for anyone who wasn't, but if you liked them back in the day, and again, maybe even if you don't, or maybe you didn't like it back in the day, this might make you change your mind. I don't know. I think it's very well written. Anything they edited out was done with the best of intentions and made it better. Just some people's noses are too red. I still don't know why. That's really my only complaint. And I'm not, if it's 10 out of 10, I'm not even detracting points for it. Just kind of bothered me in some panels. Just like, why are their noses too red? I mean, I feel like my nose is too red. Maybe I'm drunk. Fuck. I feel like I should say something before I just end this review. Something like,